put yourself in a position where you can't retreat, where it's do or die, sink or swim. Here's what you'll find out. You'll develop incredible swimming skills. You'll find yourself stroking unlike you've ever seen before. Through the inspiration of desperation, you'll become more creative than ever before. Throw your whole self into it. All you can do is all you can do. And all you can do is enough. But make sure you do all you can do.
Welcome to another episode of Burning the Boats. Today I'm here with Bo Hamrick. What's up, Bo?
Good to see you.
How you doing, man?
I'm
Thanks for joining me, man. We're doing this live. Most of our podcasts have been virtual, so I'm sitting here staring at a computer screen. But we're trying to get about once a month. We're trying to really focus on getting somebody local in here and kind of converting one of my rental properties into a podcast studio. So this is kind of makeshift, but we're getting there.
Right.
But you are actually the first podcast in the new studio, which is actually going to be back there in another room. But Bo, I appreciate you joining us. Bo, I've gotten to know you over the years from originally your wife, Leslie, taught my daughter 2 or 3 years ago, I think fourth grade?
Fourth grade,
right? Yep, at Isle of Wight Academy. And to this day, and I'm sorry to all the teachers that might be listening to this, but Emma swears it's her best ever teacher, and anybody she gets in the future is going to have a lot to live up to. A couple things came out of that. Since being taught by your wife, my daughter is now a big college basketball fan. I know you and House divided UNC.
We are.
She's Duke. The second thing is we are now on our fourth hamster since her being taught by your wife. So we're not the best at keeping them alive, but every time one goes down, another one replaces it because of Miss Hamrick. So, and then the third thing is my wife already had an obsession with Lily. Like Lily clothes and all that stuff. Your wife does too.
Yes,
and when my daughter got exposed to that from your wife and obviously the influence of her mom, now she's a fanatic about Lily.
Well, there's a reason when I see her, I call her Little Leslie.
Okay.
Because she, first of all, I think she could pass as one of Leslie's kids.
Yeah.
But two, the love of Lily and everything, it fits.
Yeah. But so that's how I got to know you, Bo. And then locally, you know, your son plays in the same rec league as my kids, and you're very involved with that. You're on the board here in Smithfield on the Recreation Association, SRA. Very involved. Your commitment, like just last week we were talking, you were out there umpiring games, you know, it wasn't even your kids' game. You know, you just always step up, seem very community focused. So at your core, you're a giver, but beyond that, I know you have a career worth of sales experience and business knowledge. So I want to get you on here to kind of talk about all that, sales psychology, your experience, things you've seen good and bad through your career in sales. You've worn a lot of hats over your career. So instead of introducing everything you've done, instead of me doing that, I'm going to turn it over to you and just kind of talk through where you started. I think you went to William & Mary, is that right?
Went Elon for undergrad.
Okay, gotcha.
And then got my master's from Mary.
Gotcha. So walk us through all that and then kind of your career, and then I'm sure that's going to tee me up for a lot of questions from there.
Sure.
So, yep.
You know, I'll start even like in high school. My dad was an attorney, owned his own practice, and I think if you asked me back then, what are you going to be? Thought I was going to be an attornay.
Right. Be like daddy.
I just want to be like my daddy. Right. And I think that's probably a compliment a kid can always give their parent, right? Absolutely. But that's what I thought I was going to be. I go to college, and one business law class, I was done. I didn't want to do that anymore.
Right.
But I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Right.
But I always tell people my first sales job was at Elon in undergrad. I was a tour guide and had to walk around and show people the campus.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now that doing that was a great introduction to sales, because you've got mama on that tour and she wants to know how safe it is, how her baby's going to be taken care of. Right? Again, think of JJ, and that's what Katie's going to worry about.
Right.
You're going to sit there as the dad going, is he going to get a good education, and is he going to get out of my house? Like, that's what you're thinking. And JJ wants to know where's the party. Right. Like, and so you have to find a way to present that campus in a way that solves all three of those needs that each of those individual people want. Had no clue at the time that's what I was doing, but that's what I figured out.
So that was kind of the training ground, but at the time you weren't aware.
Had no clue.
That's fascinating, man. Because I can relate to that from years of, let's say, selling life insurance. It usually was with the husband and wife. Husband's thinking, assuming in general he might have been the breadwinner, and maybe wife, let's say she was a stay-at-home mom. They have different perspectives about the product I'm selling, and it took me several years to realize I can't package this up as one thing. I have to sell to him, but make it seamless like and it seems like you got good early practice.
Again, I didn't figure it out until years later, but that was my initial intro. And in fact, my very first ever job offer came on a tour. It was a rainy, cold day in April, and this guy walks up to me and he goes, "You just sold this college in the rain." He goes, "You can sell boats in the sunshine." And he hands me his business card. He was a mega yacht broker down in Fort Lauderdale. And I even went down there on like a recruiting trip. Didn't take it, but that got me interested in sales. So started interviewing, ended up with a job offer from Black & Decker and their DeWalt power tool line. So they sent me with this accent to Boston, Massachusetts to sell power tools. And it was a learning experience. One, just the vocabulary that they were using that I'm not going to repeat on this podcast because it would need an explicit logo. But it was it really lit my fire for sales. And one of the things I think I learned there, and it's being reinforced every job, every year. It's kind of what you talked about in the intro. Like you see what I do with SRA and you think, oh, he serves. Sales is service, right? Absolutely. It's sitting down with somebody, understanding what are your needs, what are your wants, what are your desires, where are you at today, and where do you want to be tomorrow, and let me help you get there. And so, even that very first job, again, in steel-toed boots and a hard hat on a job site in Boston, Massachusetts, it just lit my fire for sales.
You're a bridge builder.
So,
you just laid it out perfect.
That's me. So I worked at Black & Decker 4 or 5 years, finished up there. My last role, I was working with Ferguson Enterprises, a plumbing wholesaler, and they liked what I did. And they said, hey, come work for us. So without even looking for a job, made the jump, took a new role, led sales and safety sales there, or tools and safety sales there. Did that for a couple years, and then my wife wanted to come home.
So let's go back a little bit to the Boston. Were you married at that point, or
we were dating?
Okay. Gotcha.
6 months after I got to Boston, they relocated me to Greenville, South Carolina. That's when Leslie and I got engaged. She and I met in college, college sweethearts. So we got engaged. I was in Greenville, South Carolina. She was still at Elon. She had another year to go. Plan was kind of after she graduated, we'd get married. Then after a year in Greenville, they promoted me and relocated me to Charlotte.
Got it.
So when we got married, I was in Charlotte. So I'd bought a house, little bitty small starter house for $90,000.
Good luck finding that in Charlotte. Now.
Good luck. And so she found a job in the town we were living in as a teacher. That was her first job out of college. We got married. She came on down. And after about 3 years there, she just said, I need to come home. Like, I want to have a kid. I want to have family. And I want my parents and my family around. Her entire family, she grew up, they were all in Hampton Roads.
Right.
And so they were always there for birthday parties and Christmas and every holiday. And that's what she wanted. And so we just decided to make a move. Didn't have an opportunity at that time with Ferguson to get up here. So became a financial advisor. Like we were talking earlier, I hated it. Think financial advisors are great. I love what they do. I think everybody needs to have one. I just couldn't do it. So
high stress.
And again, I think it goes back to what you were saying with talking about insurance. That's probably when I started to figure out the tour guide example, and I wasn't doing a great job being a tour guide through the financial path that I was trying to take people down.
Right.
And that's what it took me that long to figure that
Yeah.
out. But so wanted to get back into business to business, B2B sales.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my clients worked at Cintas, and he's like, "Man, you're great. You should come work at Cintas." And I thought about it, and I called him up and I said, and this was about 2008. The economy was not great. And I called him up and said, "Hey, man, are y'all hiring?" He goes, "No, we just did a hiring freeze." And he goes, "Who's looking?" I said, "Me." He goes, "Yeah, we're hiring."
Unfroze. Thawed out pretty quick. Yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah.
And so went to work there to get my feet back into B2B sales. And I covered the ocean front in Virginia Beach, calling in all the restaurants and the hotels and helping them with their image, of how they projected their restaurants and hotels. And again, great opportunity, loved it, had a good boss to learn from. But then recruiter called me and he says, "Hey, I got this medical sales position you should look at." And for some reason at the time, I thought medical sales was the place to be. And a lot of people, that's where, pharmaceutical, medical, thought that was it. So I covered the state of Virginia, selling ultrasound equipment and video laryngoscopes in case you ever needed to be intubated. And it was a great job. I mean, I drove a lot. I think I averaged an oil change every 3 weeks.
Right.
But it was a good, hard job. Then different recruiter calls and says, "Hey, I got this opportunity with a software company. You should come take a look at it." And look at it. It was a great opportunity. And again, covering the state of Virginia. The company name was MRI, which had nothing to do with the medical stuff I was already selling.
Right.
But they did property management and accounting software. And I'd always known about real estate, going back to my dad. He did loan closings. That's all he did all day long. Was close houses. Every girl I ever dated, my dad did their loan closings.
Okay, right, perfect.
Never failed. Until Leslie, thank gosh. But and I just said, "Well, I'm interested. Let's go take a look at it." And it was a good opportunity. So I decided to make the move. Went to work for MRI. Was there about 5 years, and really was, I guess, it really lit a fire for my love for real estate. I've always owned a house or rented a house, but I've never really gone out as an investment vehicle. But I got the value, and I understood what these people were doing. They're providing a place to work, live, play, shop. It was a great
scratches a lot of itches.
Yeah,
both,
it does.
Both as a provider and adding value, but also selfishly, it can be very fruitful. So,
Well, and what was interesting, my son, one year, I think it was maybe kindergarten, graduation, they asked him, like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he said, "An office worker." Because to him, that was all he knew that I did, was I went into my office and I worked.
Right.
So I'm an office worker. But it was cool now when we travel and we'll go to New York and I go, "You see that building? My client owns that building."
That's awesome.
You see that building? And even in town, we can drive around in this area and go, client. And it opened their eyes to whatever it is Dad's doing. It's kind of cool because we can see his clients out there. Not just an office worker. But
So let's stay here for a second because you said it earlier, you being a kid wanting to be like Dad, right? And so now here you are with a son, and that's really, like, he saw you as an office worker, but he wanted to be what Dad was. And now as he's maturing, you're starting to able to connect the dots. And I'm the same way with my kids. Like, I don't know that they'll have anything to do with my business but they're around it and they're seeing it all the time. Every house we're flipping or renting out or getting ready for the next tenants or making loans or talking, they're always in the back seat hearing me talk, and I would imagine if you asked either one of them, and I do often, but I want to do what you do. They don't know what it is, but so that's it's come full circle for you now that you got your kids seeing you do this stuff.
Well, and I guess the funniest part about it is, and it started with Leslie and a lot of our friends, and now the kids have picked up on it. As we were talking earlier, I cover the U.S. I travel all over the place. I go to some pretty cool things, basketball games and football games and golf and all this stuff. So now whenever I have to leave, any one of the kids will go, "Oh, Dad, are you going on a work trip?" in quotation marks. I'm like, "No, I'm working. Just happen to also be having fun."
That's right.
And I tell them a lot of times, I hope you can find a job
do both.
that you can have fun working and you love what you're doing. So figure it out.
Absolutely. And I'm going to come back to that thought because I got a question later about, kind of blending your passions in your career and stuff like that. So we'll go there later. So now you were with MRI, and then where'd you go from there?
So from there, I went to go work for another prop tech company called PeerReview.
Okay.
They were a startup. They were doing data aggregation for a lot of investors. Typically, the Harrison Streets, the big guys out there, where they have a ton of data, and we helped them bring all the data together and visualize it.
Right.
And it was a great opportunity to really get in there at a company where it was me and then the senior vice president of sales. That was it.
Right.
And I mean, everything was on the two of us to go get it done.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun to work at that level and really know that every dollar that I sold made a significant impact to the firm.
Right.
And it was a great company to work for, but
probably gave you some freedom to exercise some creativity too, I would imagine.
I did.
Right?
I mean, I had a lot of free reign because it'd be
Yeah.
like, all right, well, how do we find these email addresses?
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, let's go. Is there a software we can go buy?
Right.
Oh yeah, here it is. All right, Bo, go figure out if it will work.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of chances to really, in essence, lead the sales team without being the leader of the sales
Right.
team. And because Daryl was great. He would give me advice. I'm like, hey, you go do this, go figure it out. You got free reign. I trust you. Go. Which paid dividends with the next job.
Right.
So there was a job opening at a company called Nexus. There's AP automation for real estate companies. I'd already known the company from back in my MRI days, knew the CEO, saw the opening. I just messaged him and just said, hey, bud, should we talk? And a couple of days later, he responded. He's like, heck yeah. And I think 3 weeks later, I was starting a new job.
Yeah.
They were very quick. And there I was the director of sales, had a sales team of about 5 or 6 guys and gals. And actually really had that first opportunity to not just sell, but to actually, again, use that love of service and changed my approach from my customers no longer the real estate companies. My customer is the people on my team.
Yep.
So how do I get them from where they want to be today to where they want to be in the future?
Right.
And it opened up another avenue and another muscle to flex. And it was one that I really loved.
Yeah.
Because I think going back to your initial opening around serving people, I was able to serve those people.
Yep.
And if they ever left, which only had like one leave the whole time I was there, I always told them, once you're on my team, you're always on my team.
Right.
So I'm always here for you.
Yeah. And I can relate to that in the sense of probably the hardest thing I had to leave behind when I left my corporate career was I had gotten up into that like regional management area where I had a team of, it ranged from 15 to 20 people, but I was able to hire a lot and train and onboard and I got more fulfillment out of that, like helping them learn the sales process and how to provide value, and then watching them do it, celebrating with them, and then if I did my job well enough, then eventually they evolved into a management position or something like that. Right. So leaving that behind was probably the hardest thing to walk away from, but ultimately now I just got to rebuild it.
Right.
But to your point, it's something to be said. There's a whole bunch of different levels of sales mentality. There's the aggressive car salesman, that's more of a self-centered approach of sales. But then there's that, we keep saying the word, but that service mentality where if you truly have that and that you lead with that service, you lead with that value, whether it's a client or somebody on your team that you're training, then typically that mindset or that approach ends up rewarding you very well, and that wasn't even like the money. Yes, everybody wants to make an income, make high income and earn as much as they can, but it sounds like you're leading with that servant's heart, and that ultimately pays dividends. So yeah, that's good. So then now
now at Nexus we had a private equity firm that backed us, and when I was hired, I knew the game plan was they want to have an exit.
Yeah.
And so help us get to a point where we can exit.
Got it.
And after about 2.5 years, we exited with a strategic investment from a company. good company, good products, good
so
people.
it was kind of the better you do your job, the quicker we exit. You're out of a job.
And thankfully, I mean, when they acquired us, they kept everybody.
Yeah, good.
But I mean, it was just I went from a 300-person firm to a 20,000-person firm, and it was just a different environment. And I got lucky. A friend of mine that I'd known for all the time from MRI up, they were like, "Hey, we're looking to add a salesperson to lead our sales efforts. You know, if this new company doesn't work out, call us." And I kept saying, "I appreciate it, thanks." You know, and I just kind of kept it in my back pocket. And after about a year, I just finally said, "All right, let's talk." So we met, had dinner, and they put together a heck of an offer with a heck of a game plan of how we were going to go to market and how I could make an impact. And so went to go work at Real Foundations. Been there actually a year tomorrow.
Okay.
And leading their sales efforts. So Real Foundations is a consulting firm at heart. And historically, the top consultants, they went out there, they hunted for their business, and then once they hunted it, they ate it. And so they were part delivery, part sales. And so they wanted someone to really focus just on sales. And so that's what they brought me in to do. And I go out there and I work with all of our clients and prospects to find an opportunity for us to help them.
Right. Yep. And so that's what you're into now, or the company you're with now. So as you walk through all the steps you took, one thing that stands out, and I didn't realize this because I was fortunate enough to get with one company that at a very young age, it kind of got the hooks in me, but in a good way. Like it provided me everything and more that I could ever want. But I was able to just stay within that company. But the moment I left, when the recruiter started piling up, let me back up. My point is, when you have a resume and experience in sales at a successful level, the world is your oyster. I mean, you can name pretty much whatever industry you want to go into, and you can. And that, again, when I walked away from my career, I always know that I have that resume. I can go back into sales of some sort. So you, by being good at what you did, by being responsible with your sales abilities, and you made calculated moves, but every step you made sounded like somebody came to you, hunting you. And then it just made another opportunity, and then another opportunity, and so forth. So there's a lot to be said in sales. Like, if I could encourage any young person to try to craft one skill, it would be sales and their ability to speak. Would you agree with that?
I would. In fact, probably one of my favorite books I've ever read was Dan Pink, To Sell Is Human.
Okay.
And I'll give you the cliff notes. Doesn't matter what you're doing in life, you're selling.
Yeah.
Katie and Leslie, they're selling.
Yeah.
Because if those kids aren't bought in to them standing at the front of that classroom, they're not listening.
Yep.
So even though Leslie says she could never sell, that's what she's doing.
Right.
She's just selling to fourth graders.
Right.
Now middle schoolers. But, pastor, what's the pastor doing? He's selling you.
Absolutely.
Selling you on the gospel.
Right.
Again, obviously all the salespeople, but if I'm a doctor, if I'm a lawyer, you name it, you need to be able to sell yourself on a day-to-day basis. So being able to, a lot of people think when they hear sales is convince somebody to do what you want them to do.
Right.
And I would argue no, being good at sales is you can listen. And I can hear what it is you're saying and what it is you want, even the stuff you don't tell me. I can imply it and say, this is where they want to go.
Yeah.
And again, if you think back to any pastor, any doctor, anybody you've ever interacted with, if they've done a good job, they've sold you on a plan.
Yep.
And they did it because they were good at listening.
Yeah, and they made you feel good.
Yeah.
About what you're ultimately paying for or committing to.
Right.
I think this was on a recent podcast. I don't remember, but we got into a similar discussion about when I first started in sales. I was 23, not long out of college, and big ego, all that stuff. So my sales approach was, I'm going to talk you to death. I'm going to talk to you until you buy. So you just get me out of your kitchen. Right. And horrible approach. I was young. I didn't know any better, but and I had success with that approach. But I had a manager a couple years in. He said, Jason, your numbers are great, but you've got to learn to shut up. Like, you talk too much. And okay, so once I realized that so I didn't, at the time, I didn't like awkward silence, but I had to understand that in the sales process, that awkward silence is not them judging what I just said or overthink. They're just calculating a lot of times, and they need to marinate on what I just said. So the power of presenting a solution to their problem or asking questions so I can help them figure out what their needs are,
right,
and just shutting up.
Yep.
It took me from doing pretty good to really good. And I know you've perfected that over the years. So through your experience and career, what would you say? I know you've done some hiring, recruiting, and up sales reps and stuff like that. Give me your top few, I guess, things that or traits that you see that tend to work out more than they don't with salespeople.
So it's funny, and we were talking a little bit about baseball right before we started. You know, and a lot of parents out there get excited about their kid playing a sport, and they think, oh my gosh, they're going to win a college scholarship. I don't care about that.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't care about that is the things you learn on the ball field, the basketball court, about being coachable, about being competitive, about that mindset of a growth mindset of, hey, as long as I did the best I could do, then I can walk off this field with my head high. That's the exact same traits I look for in a salesperson.
Love it. Yeah.
Right? They need to know, look, I mean, I'll never forget, I had an opportunity with one of my reps at Nexus. I mean, by the book, she did everything right. Our price was in line. We had handled every objection. We'd followed all the sales tactics to a T the right way. They went with our competitor. And they really didn't even have a reason why. They just did.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, she was down in the dumps because it made her miss her quarter. And I remember telling her, like, look, you did everything right. That's all I care about.
Yep.
Had you won the deal and done everything wrong, it'd bit us in the back later. So I'm happy.
Yeah.
I wish we won, but I'm happy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I try to teach my kids with any sport or anything that they're doing, their schoolwork, you name it. I don't get mad at a bad grade. I get mad at laziness.
Yep. Attitude and effort.
Yep. Those are things that are going to translate into the work world, especially if they go into any kind of sales or management or anything like that.
Yep.
That coachability is important. In fact, when I interview, I would give them a website of one of our prospects. And I would say, I want you to go on there. I want you to tell me who you should reach out to based on what you know about us. And I want you to draft an email to me as if I'm one of those people. And never fails. No matter what they wrote. It could be the best email in the world. I'd find something wrong with it. Hey, that email was too short. That email was too long.
Right.
That email said "the" 7 times. You know, and I would just give them some kind of feedback.
Seeing how they can handle it.
And I would be like, write me another one.
Right.
And all I cared about was, did they listen to what we told them and did they make changes? Because if they were coachable, I can make them better.
That's a phenomenal exercise.
Yeah.
So, again, in my recruiting days of hiring and stuff, I was always trying to figure out tricks, you know, just to give folks an exercise or something to do that would expose something to me. That's one I hadn't heard before. So that, you know, that's a good takeaway. I like that. So you talk, and you mentioned doing the right thing. So like I had a mentor at Farm Bureau, and he's now an executive with Farm Bureau, but he would always preach attitude and effort, A&E, A&E, A&E. He had a sign made of it, A&E, constantly saying it. And the whole thought process was, I don't care. Obviously, he cares about the results, but I'm more focused that you have a good attitude, and attitude meaning you can recover from when things get rough or adversity. You can recover from it with a good mindset and the effort that you're putting in. So we know it's an easy formula. You make 10 calls, you probably get 3 appointments, you get 1 sale. Make 100 calls, it's a math equation. If you're doing those efforts, then the numbers don't come from that, well, then we can kind of dig in and train and figure out. But if you're doing those things, that's all that matters. Like, and just consistently trusting good attitude, good effort will always win. And it's exactly what you just said.
Yep.
So, yep. Well, let's and I could talk sales for 5 hours. So
Me too.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to try to spare you and the people listening, but I do want to get into a couple other things that I'm fascinated by, because along this journey, you decided, not because somebody asked you to, not because you're trying to get rich off of it or anything, but you wrote a few books.
I did.
Again, it goes back to I know you didn't set out to write books to get rich. You wrote books because it's another layer of your life where you could provide some service.
Right.
So talk about any of the books. I know there's 3 or 4 of them you've written.
4.
Yep. And you started a blog a while back and all that. So kind of walk us through how all that transpired, evolved, and the books you've written.
Yeah. So the first, I will talk about the first one and the last one.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, that one actually came from the blog.
Okay.
So the blog started, it's now gone, but it started because we would talk as sales peers to each other, and it would always be there, here's this problem, or here's this situation, and I would notice something, and I'm like, that's a mindset issue. Let's talk about mindset in sales. That's a handling an objection issue. And part of my morning routine, and has been for 10 years, is I write for 30 minutes a day. And I just open up a OneNote, and I just start typing, whatever comes out. And so these blog posts started to materialize as just things that I wanted to get out for nothing else other than my other friends who are in the sales world who are dealing with the same issues. And I just started writing. Mm-hmm. That led to a connection at Old Dominion with their dean of business. And he was like, hey, can you come in and talk to our sales club? And so I came in and I said, all right, these kids are all in high school or college. I'm like, what do they need to know before they go get into sales? And so I did a presentation for them, the 10 things they need to know before they get into sales. And as I was working through it, I'm like, that's 10 chapters right there. Mm-hmm. So I tried to add some of my own stories to go along with what the point was of that chapter. And next thing I know, it's a book. And again, never thought I was going to be a published author. Didn't worry about if I was making any money off of it. I didn't even know how to get myself published. Mm-hmm. But I just self-published it through Amazon, threw it out there, said, let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, it is a high when somebody you weren't expecting bought your book. And they post a picture of their kid with the book or them with the book, and you're like, oh, thanks. Like, I made 17 cents off that. That's awesome. Thank you. Right. I'll buy you half a snow cone next time I see you. But it did open up this idea that it allowed me to think, and it forced me to get my thoughts out of my head and onto a sheet of paper. And so we published that book 6-7 years ago. Mm-hmm. And again, I've always loved it because again, I think it is something that if you're new into sales, or you're thinking you're going into sales, or if you've got a family member graduating college in May, give them the book. Because it's something that would give them a couple small bits of insight they can take away from it. The last book, the one I just published at the end of last year, it's called Mistakes Were Made, Lessons Were Learned. And that whole title came from the genesis of the book. So early last year, I heard about this thing called the Trammell Crow Memo. So Trammell Crow, big real estate developer out of Dallas. Back in the 80s when the savings and loan crisis hit, they felt some pain because they couldn't get any loans and they were overextended. There were troubles within the Trammell Crow Company. And one of their partners wrote a memo. So all right, we've made mistakes. What are they? And all their partners responded to his memo. Now, of course, this wasn't a chain email because it was the 80s. Right. So it was the old paper memo. And I found the full memo in a PDF form somewhere, and I printed it out and read the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing to hear these guys that probably had a little bit of an ego having to admit, this is where I made mistakes. And then the guy that wrote the original memo wrote a follow-up going, okay, I've gotten all this. Thanks. Now, what have we learned from it? And that's where he wrote, mistakes were made, lessons were learned. And the whole organization went through this exercise of really reflecting on what have we done wrong to get us where we are today, and what can we learn from it? What would we still do again? What do we not need to do again? Right. And even if you look at what Trammell Crow, the organization, what they did, they went from being solely a developer to get into property management. Because if you can't develop and you're a developer, you're not making any money. Right. So let's become property managers so we can at least make some money when we're not developing. And that all came from that memo.
Yeah.
So I was reading that memo at the same time that Silicon Valley Bank collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
And you're reading about the savings and loan crisis and what happened in early 23. It was the exact same thing. Right? Overextended with low interest loans, now got higher interest, can't even afford to pay the interest on the savings accounts, and we're in trouble.
Right.
And I'm sitting there reading it going, man, 40 years later, and we've made the same mistake from the savings and loan to SVB. Yeah. And I'm like, are we ever going to learn from these? And that's really what triggered the book was, okay, I get the exercise, admitting I made a mistake. What can I learn from it? But clearly, as a country, we didn't learn from it,
right,
or we forgot it all.
Right.
So how can we actually learn from our mistakes? So the first half of the book is the memo. So you have a way to go read the memo. You can take your own notes. You can get your own insights from it. The second half of the book is based on my research, things you could do to learn from your mistakes and get better.
Right.
That one, it's funny. It wrote itself in about 6 months.
Wow.
6 or 8 months, and then edited it and posted it out there. Again, no clue if anybody would ever buy it.
Right.
A couple people did, and it's been great.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Yep. So, couple things there. A lot of people have, and I'm one of them. Like, I want to write a book one day. I don't know what, but I have so much in my head that I just want to spew out. That's a good platform to do it. And then you just walked us through it. Certainly wasn't a simple process because it's, you have a routine of a discipline of waking up every morning and writing, right? So you've accumulated all these thoughts, you've organized them, but from there, what's the process to getting a book from your thoughts on paper to a paperback book that people can order on Amazon?
Yeah, it's I don't know if my process is the right process, but it's mine.
Yeah.
But I'll start to write themes on note cards and going, okay, those 3 entries over there all fall within this theme. All right, let's put that there. And I just start to build the themes out. And I go, okay, now how do I tell this story in a way that should be engaging to the reader and make them want to finish the book? And I start to put them all together, and then I just start writing it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, take that post, put it here in chapter 1. Take this post, put it in chapter 2. And then it's, okay, I wrote that 8 months ago. What's changed? What's gone different? And
so it's a living document the whole time, right?
In fact, I will probably, completely start with a blank sheet of paper 3 times. And I will be transcribing it from one document to the other. I don't copy and paste because I want to go through the process of rewriting it. And I'll go, okay, did that sentence make sense?
Right.
Did that paragraph make sense? And completely rewrite it.
Just letting your brain work through
I'll
it again.
add stuff and I'll put notes like, okay, I'm at 30 minutes. I'm stopping.
Yeah.
I'm going to make these 6 or 7 notes that when I pick up tomorrow, that's what I want to work on.
Right.
And it's just a iterative process that goes for months.
Yeah, I love it. I love the fact that for years, obviously, I'm real big on creating discipline, whatever it is, and that's one that you stick to most mornings. You're going to get your 30 minutes of writing in, and that, I say it all the time, but whatever the discipline is, whether it's that, working out, sauna, ice baths, running, whatever you want to do, be disciplined with it, and that shapes your perspective about everything else. Like I have the discipline to stick to this one thing every morning, and so kudos to that. And I can't. We're going to drop the links to your book in the show notes for everybody to check out. And I appreciate you sharing that. Now I'm going to transition a little bit as we kind of start wrapping this up to get into my favorite stuff to talk about: your family, your motivation, your why, if you will. I know that's kind of cliche, but I know having to get to know having to have gotten to know you and Leslie and y'all's kids, y'all are a very tight family. Katie and myself and our kids are the same way. But I can see you guys leaning in very hard on creating experiences, creating a house and an environment where they want to be a part of it. They love their lives and all of that stuff. So speak to the importance of that. You know, why does that happen? How does it happen? And how do y'all keep it front and center?
You know, for me, and this started back when Emma, my oldest, was born 15 years ago. I always told Leslie, I don't ever want to have to tell her no.
Yeah.
Now, I may tell her no,
Yeah.
but that's because I want to.
Right.
But I don't want to have to.
I love that.
And that started with, I mean, again, when she was born, like, could you imagine if she got into this great university and we couldn't afford it?
Right.
Like, that's me having to tell her no. I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And it started with that. And then, of course, as they were kids, it was just, we found a way to never say no when it came to whatever toy or crap they wanted. And then we started to realize, like, this stuff's meaningless. Like, they get this toy, and then 6 months later, it's in a closet.
the
And
next
they're never
thing.
playing with it ever again. And I'm like, why are we filling our lives so much with things? Like, let's go do stuff. Let's go experience things. And, you know, so we've, you know, in just the last couple of years, we've taken them to New York. We've taken them to Boston. We took them. I had a business trip in Chicago. They went with me. This June, I got to be in Tampa for work. They're going to all go with me. We've been to Orlando, God knows how many times. Too many in my book.
Yeah, your wife kind of
that's
triggered
hers.
my wife did. We just were there a couple weeks ago. So.
But like I like taking them places. I want them to experience it. I mean, especially the big cities. It's one of those things. I love living in a small town. Smithfield reminds me of my hometown of Wendell, just outside of Raleigh. I love what a small town gives you. But I don't want them to think that the small town is all there is. I want them to see the cities, see what's out there.
Exposure.
And go.
Yeah.
Another thing we've done over the last few years is whenever we drove by a college or we're even near it, we stop. We take them on a tour, show them around, and just, again, give them that idea of this is what's out here.
Yeah.
We're not saying you have to go to in-state. We're not saying you got to go to Carolina. I'm not letting you go to Duke. So, but here are the options. And that's the other thing. I just want to give them as much exposure because, and I'm not saying anything negative about my parents, but like I knew when I graduated high school, I had to go to college, but I only looked in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Like there was no discussion of Radford or Tech or Clemson or anything other than
right where you're at.
Right here in North Carolina. And while Elon was the perfect place for me and it was exactly where I needed to be and it worked, I don't want to teach my kids this limiting belief that, oh, no, you're only going to college if it's within a 2-hour radius of us.
Right.
No, we're going to give you all the options. Let you see them all.
Yep. No, I love that. It's a tough balance, though. I'm curious your perspective, and this will go a little bit longer, but how do you, so your kids, I feel like most people that have certain levels or good levels of success have to go through some adversity at some point to get there, right? So they have to feel some pain to learn how to work through pain, right? So in my situation, I went through a lot of pain as a child, just with family issues and my dad and stuff like that. And I attribute just about everything I have good in me now to that adversity I went to. My kids feel none of that pain. Your kids don't feel any pain. They're traveling all over the place. So we're mine. They get what they need. They're spoiled, right?
No,
I mean, our kids are spoiled. They're
100%.
privileged kids. So their adversity is not having what they want for lunch, or not having the snack they want. So how do you deal with that? How do you avoid creating, these kids that become entitled, and turn into assholes, with lack of better words, as they're adults? How do you teach them that, but also give them all the experience of life?
I think it'll go back to sports.
Okay.
Right?
Perfect.
If
Perfect.
Carter, if he has a bad game, they lose, or he's on a team that's not very good. Like, look, dude, like, first of all, you can't control everybody else on the team.
Yep.
You can control your attitude and your effort. And you have an opportunity to be a leader.
Yep.
So go grab everybody, push them harder in practice, push them harder in the games, and go get it. Same thing with Hannah, right? Basketball, volleyball, that's your opportunity to experience some adversity. Emma dances like crazy, and it's not always easy.
Right.
There's pain. I mean, she comes home and I'm looking at her like, who beat you up at school today?
Right.
And it was like, oh, I was just dancing.
Yeah, right.
But we try to give them that. And then, like Emma now is she's got her learner's permit, so she's driving. And that's scary. But, I mean, she's really good. I'll give her that. I've been impressed with what she's done. But, like, she gets in the car to drive us somewhere, and she goes, which way do I turn? Mm-hmm. And, like, for the first month, I told her. But I told her at the 1 month mark, I'm not telling you anymore.
Figure it out.
You got to figure it out.
Yeah.
So it's those little micro errors or micro difficulties that at the end of the day, not going to kill her, not going to break her, but she's going to learn to struggle and figure it out.
Forcing her to be independent, think for herself, which builds confidence and all those things. So we're taking the same approach. We use sports and activities, whether it's baseball, cheering, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, all these things that they're a part of come with a lot of adversity. So, and if I don't take the opportunity to teach them life lessons through what they go through, just like you're doing with that, then they are going to turn into a-holes.
Right.
That's what they're going to do. So, no, that was a great answer. And I kind of figured that's what y'all's approach would be there. So, Bo, I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, when we get to talking sales, I could go on forever, and I want to be respectful of your time and the listeners' times. But I'm going to drop all of your. I know you are on social media. You probably are you on LinkedIn and all that stuff. So we'll get all of your links in the show notes for people that kind of want to follow along and check out your books and stuff like that. I appreciate you coming on.
No problem.
I know that you have provided value. You've given me a couple nuggets that I hadn't really thought about before, so I appreciate that, and I know folks are going to enjoy it. But is there anything else you got that you want to wrap up with?
I think that's it. I will let you know these are for you and Bill.
Okay,
so I appreciate it. I don't know if Bill knows how to read.
He doesn't. We're learning. He's learning.
All right,
we're getting him there. So
but
I appreciate that.
You can read it to Bill and tell him what he needs to know.
So when you talk about Boston, he and we're taking our families to. We have a networking trip in June that we're going to be in Boston for an entire week, going to see a Red Sox game and all that. So I'm excited about it. So maybe I'll read him those books at that time with some milk and all that. But Bo, appreciate you coming on. Take care.
Anytime. Take care.
All right. Well, this concludes another episode of Burning the Boats podcast. Hope y'all got as much value from that as I know I certainly did. And continue to join us each week moving forward. We release episodes on every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. Those are our interview style podcasts. And then every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern is our weekly ramble. So we'd appreciate, following along and sharing with your friends. And, if you could, take a few seconds to whatever platform you're listening on, hit the like and subscribe button. Same on YouTube as well. We're not doing this for any type of monetary gain. We make nothing off this podcast, but we're doing it more than anything else to provide value and hopefully connect people with folks in our network and whatnot. So hope you enjoy that, and you can always help us provide more value by getting it out to more folks. So please like and subscribe and share with all your friends. As always, the Burning the Boats podcast is presented by 608B Capital. We are a short-term real estate lending fund. So we offer investment opportunity for passive investors. So if you have a need for that, please reach out. And we also offer, obviously, real estate loans for fix and flippers, buy and holders, and whatnot. So if you have any of those needs, all of our information will be down in the show notes. But with that, we appreciate you listening or watching as always. And we'll see you next time on Burning the Boats podcast.